So, first off, John, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what your main area of research is and how you began in the field?
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so I'm a neuroscientist. So that sounds a bit weird that I would be working on the microbiome. And in a way, that's one of the most amazing things about the microbiome field so far is that it has an ability to touch on almost every area of medicine. And so I have always been interested in how the brain responds to a variety of signals from the body in general. And my main research area that really still permeates my research is on trying to understand about stress, and really chronic stress or traumatic stress, and how it affects the brain and how it affects the body. And then, well over a decade ago now, we realized that stress was also having an effect on the microbiome. And that was kind of fortuitous findings that we had. And then we started following the data. And that data has taken us to really weird and wonderful places, showing that the microbiome is actually crucial for brain development, that it's really plays a role during critical windows and all the way into aging. So now our lab is really focused on a lifespan approach, looking at the role of the microbiome and how it affects the brain. And our clear goals are now to see, can we dig into the mechanisms, because we have a lot of really exciting findings, but we don't really know how they're happening. And the second then is the human translation. How much of this amazing animal work can actually translate to the human condition?
So, John, what do you think is the most exciting aspect of microbiome research in the neuroscience field?
Well, what it does is it enables, but also challenges neuroscientists to think from the neck down. Because we in medicine, we love to compartmentalize disciplines. So neurologists, psychiatrists are all focusing on what's going on above the neck, and so this really challenges our concept of medicine in a different way. I think we're really neuroscience is one of the later disciplines to really embrace, if I could ever use that word, to acknowledge, to resentfully pay regard to the fact that the microbiome might be playing a role, and we there's been challenges in trying to convince people that it still is relevant, and there remains, and this is good, a lot of healthy skepticism in neuroscience about the relative contribution that this might have to humans, but only with data and only with experimentation can we move that forward. And I think the advent of two things about microbiome science that I find most exhilarating are the fact that it is the epitome of precision medicine. And so that, there may be a way in the future to be able to really pinpoint how a person is going to respond, or the natural history of a disease. And even a brain disease through the microbiome. And then also from a big data point of view, integrating data from the microbiome, which is so complex, with data from the brain, which is so complex. It just gives a lot of intellectual latitude for scientists for the future to try and do that. And that's going to be one of the great challenges we have moving forward.
When do you think patients will be able to benefit from current microbiome research in mainstream medicine?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we always say in 5 years' time that they're going to be this, and I've been saying that now for 10 years. So it becomes kind of a little bit hackneyed. But I think patients are benefiting now. I actually think they are, because they are. It's opening up new ways of thinking about preventative medicine and health in general. Because, when we talk about genome science and what genome science has done, there's not a lot you can do if you find out you have a specific gene that predisposes it to whatever else, except blame your parents or your grandparents. However, with microbiome science, there is the potential ability to actually modify your microbiome. We have a long way to go to understand that, but it really gives the patient agency potentially over their own health. And I think into the future, that's going to become more and more apparent.
What do you see as the greatest challenge in microbiome research?
Yeah, one is the cross-disciplinary
Mm.
aspect, so keeping up. You know, what I find most challenging is, you know, the bioinformatics tools and like, you know, you've just got round to understanding one
Yeah.
aspect and then a whole new, and it's wonderful and it's amazing and it's great you know, but like as a science, you know, basic scientists, we're not as used of tools changing so quickly and becoming outdated, and you know, so I think that's a big challenge. When you read these papers, like how does anyone review these papers anymore? Because there's so many different disciplines
Yeah.
hidden within it, and you really need to have that approach. And that's something that we're very lucky in Cork, in Ireland. We have a really big centre, and I think, like you guys do in Sydney, you need to have that centre-wide approach to be able to, you know, really grapple with all the different aspects, from the physiology all the way to the computational. And so that's a really, you know, that's a really big challenge. Sample size, you know, what is, you know, you know, there's lots and small studies, but are we just where GWAS data was in genomics 20 years ago? And like, you know, understanding that and then inter-individual differences is going to be huge. Trying to understand that. And then what is the microbiome? It's not a, you know, the beauty of genetics is that you get an idea of someone's genome, and that's more or less it. Whereas the microbiome varies in the time of day, varies in what you ate yesterday, varies on whether you were stressed, and all of these lifestyle factors, and trying to understand these covariates and confounds overall. So there's lots of challenges, but I think it's what an exciting area to be working in right now.
If you had unlimited resources, what scientific question related to the microbiome would you most likely explore?
Right. So one of the big questions we have right now, and this is something that you know I've discussed with some of my colleagues in Europe, you know, is what level does the microbiome signaling contribute to normal behavior? So we talk about it. So we talk about it in terms of diseases, and you can get cohorts of people with depression or schizophrenia or Alzheimer's disease, and people do that, and you can get, you know, and there's been a number of studies, and they're all variable, or autism, etc. But what about normal behavior? You know, what about how I'm responding to your questions right now, or the decision making I had this morning about what you know, color shirt to put on, or what, you know, all of these things. Does the microbiome influence these aspects of normal behavior? And to do that, then we need to do large-scale studies. We need to do field experiments out in the, you know, to really to get a large input to that. We need to combine it with human brain imaging and also with mechanistic studies in animals. And so these are some of the things that really I would like to, in the future, like to move into, really to understand what are the constraints. And then, so if I find that I can modify my microbiome through a dietary mechanism or other way, can I shift how I respond? And maybe I could have, you know, worn a much more outlandish shirt or whatever, you know. And I don't want to trivialize it, but in terms of decision making and risk taking and how we work in teams and how we work in an environment, all of this is derived from homeostatic signals that we get that are learned. Some of them are subconscious, and many of them are regulated through homeostatic mechanisms. And if we see the microbiome as the key regulator of all aspects of homeostasis, then I'm very intrigued about this. But this requires also psychologists to embrace the microbiome, and they're a bit slower even than neuroscientists.
So what would you say is the best advice to care for your microbiome?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to be simplistic and use the diversity mantra, which is really, you know, really important one, like in all aspects of life. As we know, diversity is really important. And I think that's probably one of the best advices we have. You don't want, you want to nourish. And so building on the work from here in Cork, where they show that in elderly individuals that they had, those that had a more diverse microbiome had a better health outcome, less frailty and a variety of other measures, then you start trying to understand or trying to put in place, well, how do I build that diversity in my microbiome? and diversity in diet is perhaps one of the ways. So the good things is it's not all about what we shouldn't do, because we're very good as a society to say you shouldn't do this, and so yes, you know there's a lot more, but there are things that we can do that are not so difficult. In terms of lifestyle choices, in terms of dietary choices, in terms of diversity in general. And so I think that's kind of the, one of the things that I would encourage people to look at. Try and avoid things that we know are negative for our microbiome. The highly processed food, the sweeteners, stress, which is difficult to avoid. But then try and build in things like fermented foods and fibers, which we know are really good for the microbiome. And so I think there would be my tips overall to try. But again, it's often like do what I say and not as I do. It's hard sometimes in a busy lifestyle to try and integrate all of this, and I'm aware of that. But I think it's about adding color to your palette, and almost anything with great color in natural colors in terms of vegetables and fibers will be really useful.
So where do you see microbiome research being in 5 years from now?
Yeah, so the 5 year from now question.
Yeah.
I think it will have, we will be at a stage where we'll be able to see what actually can we achieve in relation to therapy. So FMT was like this, and it's kind of, but the plateau effect and the hype cycle will be interesting to see what, in what situations will FMT be useful. Secondly, in relation to a better understanding of that diet microbiome brain interaction, I think we'll have better human trials and be able to understand what we can do, and maybe offer more concrete guidelines and advice to patients and to people based around these questions that you were asking, that they're not just hypothetical, but they're actually rooted in actual science. I think there will be a clarity about how that we're really not focused on what microbes are there, but what they're doing, and that's really crystally important. And there's lots of redundancy in that, and so I think that would be very, very important. And finally, I think in terms of innovation and hype, I think we'll have seen the first generation of startup companies have come and understand where this is really going, and where investment can actually be made, and where health benefits can actually come out of this. But I would hope, and this is what I love about World Microbiome Day, is that it really would allow the entire world, or the entire community, to start thinking about their microbiomes, and that it's not just a fringe aspect of preventative or lifestyle medicine, but it comes into the mainstream, that when you go to your physician, that they say, well, how is your microbiome? And maybe we need to do something about
that. So John, do you have a highlight in your research curve so far?
Well, I guess one of the most, and this is one of the biggest highlights for me, is just being able to work in when I moved back to Cork, which is 15 years ago now, and I had never worked on the microbiome, so I was a stress neurobiologist, and I arrive as a relatively new PI in Cork, and there's all these amazing people who are just so excited about something I know relatively little about. I mean, very few people did in them days, and just for me that was a huge highlight, was just being able to see this excitement and watch the field go, and watch the field progress from me being somewhat evangelical in the wilderness, in Cork, to actually now be that every neuroscience conference will have at least one microbiome-based talk. Yeah. And this has really been and then the highlight then has been working with all the amazing postdocs and scientists in my own team, and watch their careers, and then go off around the world and set up their own labs. And I think that's been really, something that's really exciting overall. And also, I never stopped with being surprised about where the microbiome is taking me. our findings around myelination, for example, were really came out of nowhere and have taken us into this whole new interesting way of discovery. And so, yeah, it just keeps surprising.
Thanks, John.
And then we'd like to conclude on a bit of a fun one. So if you weren't a world-renowned microbiome researcher, what would you be?
That's a good question. And what would I be? I would be probably not a world-renowned. You know, I'm very interested in creativity and interdisciplinary aspects of life. So if I wasn't a scientist at all, I probably would be into creative arts or something like that, because I have a really strong interest in that, and I like bringing my microbiome into that, and I like, you know, bringing things down. I probably would be a really bad poet or something, but, you know, like that, that only the Irish can do overall. But I think, you know, what microbiome has enabled me is to use creativity and to think outside the box in different ways. And I think I would probably be in having fun doing that somewhere, probably, I don't know where in the world, but maybe even in Ireland as well, in the rain.
Okay, cool. Thank you, John, for taking the time to speak to us today.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.